Hi, welcome to the Author's Room. My name's Alice Clark-Platts and I'm a crime author and novelist and also a teacher of creative writing. In the Author's Room, I invite several of my author friends in to talk about their writing technique, give us some tips on what they do to create fantastic novels, and they will also recommend their favourite reads and also talk about their books that they've written. So subscribe to the channel, ask questions in the comments below and hit like if you like this channel. Welcome, Harriet Tyce. I'm so excited to have you on the bookship because I absolutely love your books, and I met you when was it? 2019 maybe. I think it was when the Flower Girls first came out.
It was your Flower Girls launch. I came along. I popped along to the bookshop, and it was those days that we could actually still go to book launches and meet in person. But no,
it snowed, and it was just also lovely. It was like such a nice evening. We had a few glasses of wine. For those of you who are joining us who don't know Harriet, she is the most amazing author of the Sunday Times and Amazon Kindle and international bestseller of the brilliant book Blood Orange, which was a fantastic book, and her latest book, The Lies You Told, which I'm utterly gripped by at the moment, has been described as having a jaw-dropping last line twist and a breathless read with a shocker of an ending. First, Harriet, you have chosen for the bookship this month the brilliant book, which I was really pleased that you chose this because I hadn't read it in ages, so it's good to reread it, the book Apple Tree Yard. You've chosen Louise Doughty's Apple Tree Yard, and maybe just tell us a little bit, like a summary of the plot and why you love it, why you recommended it as a good book to read.
Essentially, I mean, it's a book about a 50-something-year-old woman, Yvonne Carmichael, who's a very senior and important scientist who embarks upon a really quite mucky illicit affair with a man that she meets when she goes to the House of Commons to make a presentation to a select committee. And she gets involved with this man who she thinks is a spy, and they have various outdoor encounters. A little bit later on, she is raped in really quite a horrific way by one of her, I'm not going to say colleagues because he's in a junior position to her, but somebody who she encounters at a work party. And later on, that same man is found to have been beaten to death. And that's all the backstory to where the book begins, which is as a trial at the Old Bailey, where Yvonne is being tried for murder and manslaughter, along with the man with whom she has had the affair. And it's an incredibly interestingly told, I mean, in terms of its narrative structure, it's really interestingly told, that we have this sort of backbone of the trial along which the sort of story hangs. You'd mentioned second person before, that a lot of the backstory is as she speaks to you, who we don't know who that is until we find out about halfway through that it's the co-defendant, the man that she had the affair with. And really the question that we're reading to find out from the beginning is who these people are, who's being tried for murder, who has been killed, and what's going to happen. And it's got so many layers. It's an incredibly interesting book. I mean, and I chose it partly because in itself it's a really interesting book, but also because actually I owe it a huge debt in terms of the writing of Blood Orange, because it was the acknowledgements to it that made me realize that maybe I had something to say as someone who had been a criminal barrister in the past, and that maybe I could bring some of that experience to bear on the page, which is what led to Blood Orange. So, you know, it's a really important book to me.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that because, I mean, we have that in common as well. We both come from a legal background, but you were the performer with the wig, and
yeah,
and in crime too. So, I mean, how realistic did you find that portrayal of the Old Bailey and crime, the criminal law system?
I thought it
in
was really well done. I mean, I have to say, I had a really junior practice, so I didn't make it to the Bailey much. I did a couple of bits for Pupil Masters, and I sat in on trials that they were doing. But, you know, my own practice certainly didn't stretch anywhere as far as that. It seemed to me that she got just about all of it really very accurately done. And I think that the main thing that she was trying to get across, which is the treatment of women as witnesses or complainants in rape trials, and how much women's sexual history is brought in to attack them. That was really well done in how the whole thing came across. She had spent Louise Doughty had spent, I think, 4 or 5 weeks observing a trial from beginning to end at the Bailey, in order to make sure that she'd done her research and that she got the details as right as she could. And this really, that was the moment when I thought, well, hang on a minute, I wouldn't need to do that research actually, because I've already done, you know, I've done the job, so I don't need to worry about and I'm quite lazy. So actually, why not use the 10 years actually for a fictional purpose?
It's a brilliant kind of background to a story, isn't it? Because we love a trial. I mean, you know, look how many TV programs there are like based on court series and that sort of thing. We love a murder, we love a whodunit, but actually she kind of used that it was a bit sneaky of her, because she wasn't really interested in that. She was actually interested in the fact that there was this woman who also wasn't a young woman, she was an older woman. And I mean, you described it as a mucky affair, you know, because we do have this sort of thing of like, oh, you know, women of a certain age should not be going to have sex and in alleyways, in apple tree yard, you know, outdoors, with random strangers. That's put into a criminal context. You know, the tendency is to go, well, obviously she's guilty, you know, she must be guilty because she's already crossed the line in terms of what society thinks is appropriate behavior. So I mean, that's what I really like about the book, is that she kind of like, she gets you over thinking about all these things without even knowing that you're really thinking about them.
There was an interview I listened to between Louise Doughty and Mariella Frostrup at the time of the publication of the book, and that was exactly what she was trying to do. That there's a lot of very sort of political points being made in there. I mean, one of the in it, and it's almost sort of a funny way of starting it, but the first sexual encounter between Yvonne Carmichael and Mark Costley is, they meet at the door within the House of Commons, and he takes her down to the chapel and then opens the broom cupboard, which is the really sort of the famous broom cupboard where the suffragettes had hidden, and that's where they first have sex. And it's kind of, you know, it's just so funny that you've got that, you know, major motif symbolism being sort of whacked over your head, but equally you're sort of looking at the fact that there are these two people who've barely spoken to each other, who they don't even know each other's names, and they're going off to have this sort of this torrid shag, which is just, you know, it's sort of 4 o'clock in the afternoon kind of thing, which is brilliant, you know, in some ways. Or, you know, it's really cleverly done.
Also, hearing you said the fact that he's called Costly, you know.
Yes.
It's like that's a slight subtle bang over the head, isn't it? I mean, like, how costly was it? Like, quite, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it earlier about the idea of the second person. I don't know if people who are tuning in kind of get that there is this form of writing, this perspective, which is it's like writing a letter, so you or a diary or something, where you say like, the whole book is addressed to you. And so obviously the strange thing about that as a reader is you don't know who the you is. So I mean, you could feel that the you would be you, the reader, or you could feel, you know, it depends how the author kind of sets it within the story.
I think that it's kind of quite claustrophobic that you're there sort of in this very intense conversation she's having in her mind. And to see the extent of her obsession at the beginning, where she's completely caught up in this man who she becomes convinced is a spy, and you sort of understand, I think, from the inside how it is that you could get caught up in something which is quite so intense, even though from the outside it's like that he's just a bloke in a suit who said, "Come with me." And if you were to tell that, I think almost in any other way, you would be completely like, what's she doing? Why is this woman behaving in such a stupid
no, I
way?
think that's right.
But when you're sort of playing through the decision-making process that she has herself, I think it gives it a lot more life, and it gives it a lot more sort of justification. I mean, if it were third person, if it were all Yvonne thought this, I think you'd just be like, well, she's stupid to think that, isn't she?
Yeah, because it is like a madness, isn't it, really? And
yeah,
I mean, she's
yeah.
kind of clinical scientist, you know, who's just very methodical and like, this is, and she just, all of that. And we've all had it. I mean, like, I like to think we've kind of gone past it, you know, that sort of teenage crush, like, you know, and I don't know, maybe it waits for us in our 50s.
That's it. I mean, she is sort of post children, having left home, and 28 years of marriage or whatever it is, and she would have thought, and I mean, and that's something, you know, that comes through, that she's, I think, knocked sideways by the fact that she's overwhelmed by this, you know, for somebody who turns out essentially to be really quite an ordinary, you know, not particularly nice bloke, and then everything else that sort of comes from it.
He's a spy. I mean, like, you're like, oh my god, no. You know, he ends up, he's a like security guard for Woolworths or whatever. I mean, like, it's so ridiculous. Like, yeah. Moving on to your books, I mean, obviously, I could like, you know, reading Blood Orange, I can see how Apple Tree Yard was a huge influence on you. I mean, your books are very concerned with this idea of like strong women, independent women, kind of meeting these crises in their lives and how they deal with that, you know, how they kind of like, you know, battle their way out, I guess.
Yeah.
And I really want to concentrate on the Lies You Told, because that's your book that's out, which, tell us a little bit about the story. Tell us about the premise of that.
Well, the premise is that woman Sadie has to return unexpectedly to London with her 10-year-old daughter. Her marriage has collapsed. She's been living in America and everything was fine, and her marriage has suddenly collapsed. And so she has come running back to London, and she has at her disposal her mother's old house. Her mother is dead, and this has been left to them on the proviso only that the daughter is sent to the school that Sadie herself attended when she was a child. She didn't like her mother, she doesn't like the house, and she doesn't like the school, but because of the marriage collapse, she's not really had much choice but to go ahead with this. So they turn up, and it's year 6, it's in the move up to end of school exams to get through to the secondary. It's a very toxic, competitive environment. And while at the beginning, Sadie thinks the main problems are going to be for her daughter Robin in the playground, what she discovers is actually it's far worse for her at the school gates, dealing with the other mums.
I mean, the school mum thing is truly, truly terrifying. I mean, I'm sure we've all, well, for those of us who are mums, have had, you know, similar experience when you rock up, you know, and you've forgotten that it's UN Day or whatever, or you haven't baked the muffins, and, you know, there's the mum that always has, and there's that feeling of inadequacy and that you haven't kind of. But these mums are like something else. These are like Stepford wives, kind of beyond compare. Is this something that you have experienced, Harriet? I mean, I really hope you haven't.
I mean, 11 years of primary school does tend to give a little bit of inspiration, but obviously, it being crime fiction, I took reality and cranked it up several notches. So nobody was as bad as that which I described, but you know, they could have been, and that's the thing, that they're, I'm quite sure in the right circumstances, some of them could very well have behaved in the way that the women I described behave.
Yeah, it's the kind of you know, it's the sort of elevation of things that seem really insignificant into like massive issues.
Because lies at the core is about the pressures that parents put to bear on their children and how they should just leave them alone a bit. And because the trial involves a teacher who's become sexually involved with one of his pupils, also wanted to look at with the pupil's story was that she herself was the product of parents who weren't really paying attention in the right kind of a way, which meant that she was, she was ripe for the picking, shall we say, that she was vulnerable to be exploited by somebody predatory. And
it must be kind of hard though, writing sort of criminal law into books, because you kind of have to plant your flag somewhere, don't you? Like, as the author, you kind of have to, your character's going to have to come down on a side. And so as the author, how do you do it? Because you want to balance it out, so you don't want to have to. That must be quite tricky to do that. I've only just thought about that.
It's editing. You have to go back and make sure that it's not been quite too. You have to be a bit more subtle, and if it's gone too heavily one way or the other, then you can go back and you can go back and change it.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because I mean, as I think you're the chief barrister in your plot and the lies you told says, I don't care if he's innocent or not. My job is just to disprove the prosecution. That's all I have to do. It doesn't matter to me. So that's quite hard for a reader, for a lay reader. Like when we read that, we're like, but we want to know, is he innocent or not?
And I think that's what made me a really bad barrister, actually, and it's as well as I got out of it, because I did care when it came down to it, and I shouldn't have, because actually, one should have a belief in justice and actually seeing things being done in an objective way, because it is for the Crown to provide the evidence that's beyond reasonable doubt so that somebody can be found guilty, rather than for that things to come out because of how you feel or whatever. But I would sort of represent people who were giving me the most stupid defences possible when it was quite clear that they were talking bollocks, and it actually really offended me that I was going to have to stand up and put that forward and be anyway kind of, which I know is terrible.
Well,
it's absolutely.
We're going off track here. We're going a bit legal, but you can be professionally embarrassed, can't you? You can say,
well, if somebody actually tells you, it's no good if you're just suspecting it. But if somebody actually tells you that they've done it, then you are professionally embarrassed, and you shouldn't represent them. And you can't represent them. You have to withdraw from the case and let somebody else deal with it. And that's something that I play with in Blood Orange. That it's a sort of, even though she doesn't end up acting ethically. I think she acts morally correctly, but some might argue that. But I think that to me is what makes it more interesting, is that sort of exploration of the tension within you as a representative of somebody, how much you believe them, and does it matter? And it shouldn't, professionally speaking, it shouldn't matter at all what you think.
But it's very hard in these like he said, she said cases, isn't it? Because ultimately the law is inadequate really in those cases, because beyond reasonable doubt, I mean, how is it proven? It can't be. It is basically proven by who you believe.
Well, that's it. And I mean, and hopefully some solid physical evidence that might help, that is incontrovertible, like solid DNA evidence or whatever. But the problem is you can see things from both sides in the absence of that, and it makes it very, very difficult. That's where crime fiction, I think, can spark off ideas, and that's what you get to, it's those gaps between stories and those differing perspectives and those differing points of view that lead to narrative. And, that's, I think, in a way, to sort of go back to Apple Tree Yard, because all we have is her perspective all the way through, and then we hear the evidence sort of externally, but and you only can see what she thinks, and then you get this kicker ending, which is just like, oh wow, that was not what I had necessarily seen coming, and it's just really interesting.
Yeah. So, well, what's next for Harriet Tyce? What is on your what are you beavering away writing?
I am currently editing my third book. Title as yet undecided, though we're getting there. Which is another psychological thriller, and it opens in Edinburgh after New Year 2020, where a party has gone very badly wrong, and there are bodies impaled on iron spiked
Oh
railings
my gosh.
outside a very exclusive Newtown Edinburgh address. And basically, yeah, you're reading to find out who they are and what on earth has happened.
Amazing. I can't wait to read it. So when will that be out?
All being well, I think that's March of next year. So yeah.
Oh, same time as mine. Well, hopefully
Oh,
we can have some
brilliant.
parties together.
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would be really good.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Harriet, for coming on.
You're
It's been really
welcome.
nice to
Thank you
talk
for
to you.
having me.
Love having a bit of a chat about the law. Takes me back to my days in the Royal Court of Justice I was, but you know.
Oh, fancy. Fancier than me. Bit more fancy than Sitting Bull Mags.
Excellent. Well, best of luck with your edits.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to be in touch when I get to the end of The Lies You Told, because I want to see what this last line twist is. I better not read it in the night time, otherwise I'll never sleep.
I'm sure you'll be fine. Oh, well, look, thanks very much for having me on. Nice to talk to you.
Oh, thanks, Harriet.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everybody. Nice to see you all. Bye. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, subscribe and like this channel and check out my other videos with more amazing authors. And if you want to know more about writing your own great novel, check out my course, Telling Yourself the Story. Details below in the comments. Thanks for watching.